John, at least 2 or maybe 3 times, tells us about Jesus and the experience of visiting in Jerusalem and what he does there, and that the others do not include. And this is one of them. Early on in his ministry, we read this. The Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. And this is interesting, though in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria, and we note that. No, he did not have to go through Samaria. He chose to go through Samaria because most of the Jews avoided going through Samaria, but he walked right through the middle of it. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near a plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph, and Jacob's well was there. And Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, please note, John is telling us that Jesus Christ was indeed a human being, flesh and blood. And tired as he was from the journey, he sat down by the well. And I've always imagined him sitting there with a spot of sweat on his back as he waited for the disciples to come back from town. It was about the 6th hour, that is, high noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into town to buy food. Let's listen to where this leads.
Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Read that.
It was an accepted thing, and we need to perhaps ask why. Because nearly 900 years before that, Rehoboam had split the nation in two, divided it into north and south, and there was always the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Samaria and Judea. Then 722 BC, the Assyrians conquered the Samaritans and carried most of them off as slaves. And then there was an assimilation and a blending and a mixture. And they adopted a place of worship on Mount Gerizim. And this was a violation of everything that the Jews believed, because they had now left the temple and they had formed their own worship. And Jesus has something to say about this a little bit later. But for now, he violated everything that they had been taught. Jews have no association with Samaritans, but Jesus ignored that. And he answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water, if you'd known who I am and what it is I have to offer you."
This moment is so much more than just about literal water. It's very clear from just one read of it. You can see that there's so much symbolism and just depth to what this story is happening. This woman, we know her as the Samaritan woman at the well. She did have a name, and that's something to note. You know, something happens with a lot of female characters in the Bible where they just, we don't know their name. They live down in the books of history as being the woman at the well, and she had a name. She had a story. She had a family, or not a husband and children, but she had relatives and friends, and there were details to her life that I think we don't often stop to ponder, because we just sort of want to see, well, what can we get out of this and how can we move on from it? And she was hurting, and not just hungry or thirsty for water. She was thirsty for something deeper. She had a lot of judgment. She was not a particularly proper woman. She didn't, you know, she kind of colored outside the lines of traditional gender roles and behavior. She wasn't morally perfect. She had a kind of a complicated sexual history, and she was thirsty. She was looking for salvation and looking for God. And she came to this well not only thirsty for water, but thirsty for the living water, that water that would really nourish her and restore her to God. And, Jesus says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you the living water. So there's this idea here that she doesn't quite know what's happening. She knows she's meeting with a man that's a Jew, and she's caught off guard by that. She does not expect a Jewish man to approach her at a well. That's not what happens. If we can get out of our 21st century mind and go back to the first century, you didn't just approach a woman at a well and ask, especially a woman who was rejected by your culture. Can you imagine? It's hard to find an equivalent, but this was not very common for Jesus, for a Jewish man, to cross boundaries that the Jews had set. They had said Samaritans are not who we're going to talk to. And women, she is a dirty woman. She's filthy. She has a past. We don't need to approach her. But Jesus chooses to enter into relationship with her, despite her past, despite what's wrong, despite what she did wrong. And he is so vulnerable with her that he asks her for a drink of water. Can you believe that? That Jesus is so vulnerable and transparent with this woman that he even admits that he is thirsty and trusts her to fill his bucket with water.
Perhaps there's no more living, warmly received, well, really a kind of a sweet way to approach people than to ask them for a favor. We are used to being approached perhaps in this way, but I think that a great honor we do people when we ask them for a favor. And so Jesus was honoring this woman when he asked her for a drink of water, despite who she was, despite the fact that she was a Samaritan. So Jesus crossed this line, and we don't know whether this woman did not understand what Jesus was saying or whether she's being a little bit of a smart aleck and acting in this way. You have nothing to draw with. If you want to talk about getting water, you don't have anything. Are you greater than our father Jacob who came here? And Jesus answered her, listen, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water that I give him, so we're not talking about liquid, H2O, we're talking about something else. Whoever drinks the water that I give him will never thirst again. Indeed, the water that I give him will become in him or her a spring of water welling up to eternal life. So what do you think of that?
So they're starting to get a little more honest. The truth is starting to come out a little bit, that this is not just about water. It's about sort of the heart of the matter, who she is and her past and what she really needs. And Jesus is offering this living water, this water that doesn't run out. It's abundant. It's everlasting. And she realizes that that's what she needs. She says, "Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." If you've been thirsty before, you know how you know how urgent that feels, like you just need a drink of water. Well, I think for her, she was so parched to be seen, to be heard. No one looked at her. No one looked her in the eyes. Women rejected her. They didn't see her as worthy of being friends with. She was an outcast because of the decisions that she had made. And so she was so thirsty for someone to see her, to really see her, and not see her just by being a Samaritan or just by being a woman or just by being someone with a complicated past. She was thirsty for someone to really, really see and know her. And so that's why she immediately, without hesitation, says, well, give me some of that water. I want some of that. Whatever you have, I need that.
But she wasn't quite sure what this constituted. What is this water? Was she reaching out for something that was unnamed that Jesus had to offer her? She was smart enough to know they weren't talking about fluid. But what was Jesus talking about? And I think this is the way Jesus has of opening up the conversation. Let's get real. Let's talk about what you really need. And let's talk about what you're really looking for. This is what I think he's doing when he said to her, go call your husband and come back here. How did she answer?
Can you imagine being her in that moment? You know, this man has just cut you to your core. You thought that you could skirt around that, maybe leave that for the next chat at the well. Let's come back and talk about that. But Jesus doesn't really waste time. You know, I mean, one thing about Jesus is that every minute counts. He doesn't really waste his words. He doesn't waste his time. And every encounter he has with someone is really important. And every word he says is important. So when he says, go call your husband, it just sort of cuts her to her core. She knows that he knows her in a way that no one else does or has ever tried to know her. She answers and says, I have no husband. And then, you want to say what?
Yeah, let me respond. There's nothing else she could say. I have no husband. And now we know her history. And so Jesus said to her, you're right. When you say you have no husband, the fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is true. That should open her up, shouldn't it? Well, does it indeed? Jenna, tell me how the woman responded to that. What you have just said is quite true. You don't have a husband, but what?
You've had 5 husbands. I mean, gosh, think about the emotions that are coming up for her, the shame, think about how divorce is treated today and how there's still some shame with being divorced. You know, we can relate to that. If you know someone that's divorced or you've been through a divorce yourself, you know that there's kind of a sense of shame. That's only a small bit of what this woman is experiencing. She has had 5 husbands. She's been sort of perpetually seeking out her worth through failed marriages. And I think that Jesus is going to call her out on that. He's not going to give her some slack and say, that's too sensitive. We can't talk about that. He knows her and loves her. And so he's able to talk to her about something that's so personal and so sensitive. And she responds by saying, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet." So she almost, I can feel her just like a wall kind of goes up. Like she's like, okay, we're not going there, and almost like a wall sort of comes up. Because wouldn't you put a wall up if someone approached you at a well and talked about your 5 husbands? I mean, wouldn't you start to say, hey now, like, okay, that's just a little too personal for me. But she does want to continue the conversation. She's not going to run away. She's not going to say, this man is judging me. She feels safe. Can you believe that? A woman, a Samaritan woman who feels safe enough to talk about her history in a vulnerable way with a Jewish man. This is just a huge, huge thing. But she says, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you Jews say in Jerusalem that this is the place where one ought to worship." So she does kind of put that wall up, but she's still engaged. She hasn't run away. She hasn't, apologized or gone into, explanation of her 5 husbands. But she's acknowledged that she sees something in him that's different than every other man in her life.
But she changes the subject, doesn't she? I don't want to talk so much about that. Let's talk about this. I think I've seen in many instances when talking to somebody about their relationship with God, rather than talking about this, let's talk about that. And so that's what she's doing when she said, I see that you're a prophet. Our fathers, and she goes back 900 years with this, our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that Jerusalem is the place where he should be worshipped. Let's talk about religion in general. You can hide from God and talk about religion in general. And so Jesus says, that's not the point. We have something as Jews that you Samaritans have not seen. Yes, we do have a better understanding of God than you Samaritans do, but that's not the point. Mm-hmm. The day is coming when they will worship God neither in this mountain, Gerizim, nor in Jerusalem in the temple. But they that worship God will do what? They will worship him in spirit and in truth. For God looks for those, expects those, is seeking those who will worship him in that way. A very important, fundamental, just key understanding of God. God is not interested in where we worship. He's not interested in the place. He's interested in the spirit. God is interested in our responding to him where we are. For God is in all places and in all time. Not just in Gerizim or in Jerusalem, but wherever we are. I am here to tell you about that God who's ready to receive you where you are now. And verse 25 tells us that she began to get it.
Mm-hmm. And I think, she definitely, like I talked about putting up that wall, it's not that she wanted to avoid some of the most painful things in her life to talk about, but she's so caught off guard that someone even cares. I mean, why would you even care about me and my story? And so there's this effort to kind of, to put up that wall and to create some space, okay? Because she's feeling very, very vulnerable. But she does continue to hear him as he talks about that, as Emil said, the time will come when it doesn't matter where you worship or what mountain you worship on. It matters that you worship in spirit and in truth. And she says, I know that the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will tell us all things. So she's starting, maybe some deep down in her, in her heart, she feels like he might be the Messiah. And so she's kind of testing the waters, like, I know there's a Messiah coming. And then Jesus says to her, I who you speak of, I am who you speak of. I am he. So this moment, this moment where Jesus reveals fully who he is, and his identity to a woman at a well, a woman with a complicated history. That shows you the kind of God that God is. God is not interested in just talking to the Pharisees or the religious rulers, or just, doing the the socially correct thing to do. God cares about getting down into the nitty-gritty of human life and building relationships with people who have been overlooked by society. That is who God is, and that's the Jesus that we see in this story.
It's an amazing thing that not more than one or two times, even obliquely, does Jesus openly say who he is. And I find it quite remarkable that this is one of those times. The Samaritan woman who had lived for years in adultery, who was from another race, another religion, who was morally and socially and culturally and racially an outcast. It is to her that he says, I am who you're looking for. I am the Christ. May I just say how she responded? We're told just a little later that she left Jesus. She forgot about her water pot. She forgot why she had come. She left her water pot and went running back into town, and she told the men. And I find that almost amusing that she didn't tell the women. She told the men. She went and told the men, I have talked to one who told me everything ever I have done. Is this not the Christ? It is amazing that we make our confession and our acknowledgement, our commitment, our announcement about faith in Christ to people that we want to hear it. And she wanted the men to know something has happened in my life. There's a little, you want to touch that, or you want me to, Jenna? Down in verse 42. Let's look at that. You want to talk about that, or do you want me to?
Well, just one more thing about, verse 27. And at this point his disciples came, and they marveled that he talked with a woman, yet no one said to her, what do you seek, or why are you talking with her? And I can just kind of see the disciples they're like, oh, what's he doing? There he goes again. He's at a well, where's this going to go? They're kind of nervous watching Jesus break the rules again. He's just a rule breaker. He works on the Sabbath. He touches lepers. You just can't tie him down. And they don't know what to do with that because they're really looking for someone that is predictable and, kind of just goes by the status quo. And here he has completely gone off the radar going and talking with this Samaritan woman. She does leave her water pot, which I think is just a beautiful, beautiful image because she's not only leaving her physical water pot, she's leaving, her other efforts to fill that void in her life. She doesn't need that water pot anymore because she's found Jesus. Jesus is the living water in her soul, and Jesus is going to sustain her. She doesn't have to go and have, husband number 6 to figure out that she is loved by God because Jesus has given her this message. And so she can leave all that behind at the well because she will not thirst anymore. She is being sustained by living water.
There's the closing word. I guess there's a lot that we could say about this, but there's one little wrap-up word here that I want us to look at. The men came out and they met Jesus as she had invited them to, and the disciples had been offended at Jesus talking to a woman, but by the way, they didn't say anything to him about that. They said, if he wants to do that, that's up to him, even though it bothered them. But the men who came out and met Jesus at the invitation of the woman said this, we heard what your witness was, but now we have come to believe him, not because you have told about him, but because we have come to believe in him ourselves. Maybe there's hardly anything more important about this whole conversation, this whole meeting, and that we meet him one at a time. We come into relationship with him, not in groups, not in armies, not in masses, not in audiences, but we come to meet him and have a relationship with him one at a time. And they said, now we have come to see that he is the Messiah because we have met him and we believe in him ourselves. And I think this woman would have said, well, good for you. I've already come to know that myself. What an amazing, revolutionary kind of thing happened in the life of this woman. For Jesus crossed every barrier that we can think of. The racial barrier, the religious barrier, the moral barrier, the gender barrier, every one of them, because he was not interested in barriers or in walls, but in reaching people.
And, I think it begs us to ask, what are we thirsty for? What are you thirsty for in your life? Maybe it's deeper relationships. Maybe it's, more purpose and meaning in your life. Maybe it's, learning more about the world or traveling or knowing God better. I think Jesus knows what we're thirsty for, and Jesus will meet us at the well and provide water that the world cannot provide. And I think more and more you see that there's something that we're all looking for that is not that the world can't give us. And we keep looking for the world to give it to us, don't we? We go to, the store or to, just different places trying to seek out because we're so thirsty. And we don't realize how thirsty we are until we meet the one at the well who actually sees us and gives us what we've always been looking for. And so I just invite y'all this morning to meet Jesus at the well. Meet Jesus in your life. Read scripture with fresh eyes. Don't just pass over this story as the Samaritan woman at the well. Read it again. Read it closely. Think about her for more than just a few minutes. Think about who she was and her history. Think about why her name is not given. They knew people's names. They could have asked her name. Why is her name not in the story? It's a story to wrestle with, to learn from. And ultimately, I think it's a story about a Savior who cares so much about each and every single person. Because even though God came to save the whole world, John 3:16, that verse, the whole world, guess how that happens? It happens one well at a time. And so the same God that cares about the big salvation of the world is the very same God that wants to meet every single person where they are, with what they're dealing with, and provide a living water, something that the world cannot give them.
Thank you so much. And I'd like for you to bow for just a moment of prayer and everyone to sing.